Well, welcome to the Cinnabar. Now today we're going to be test firing a couple of unusual variants of the Colt Lightning magazine rifle, or as they're most commonly referred to as just simply a Colt Lightning. What we've got today is two medium frame Colt Lightning baby carbines. Now baby carbine is a term that both Colt and Winchester used for a variant of their standard carbines, but they mean a couple of different things. Now, Winchester used baby carbine to describe what most collectors today call a trapper, which is a carbine with an under 20-inch barrel. But Colt did something a little bit differently in their baby carbines, in that they still have a 20-inch barrel, but they have a lighter barrel profile, or a smaller profile, to lighten them up. Okay, you could actually order a baby carbine with a shorter than standard barrel, and I have seen them, but they're extremely rare. I've only seen a couple of them that were right, that hadn't just been cut down. But they are out there. Now, these are a couple of Lightnings that I've picked up just recently, and it's always kind of a tough thing to purchase a Lightning rifle, because a lot of them won't feed right, especially ones that have been used a lot. You know, these are old rifles that they were actually designed by a dentist, and you know, if they've been used a lot, the parts wear and whatnot, and they just can be problematic. But I'm one of those few silly gunsmiths that actually work on Colt Lightning rifles, so I buy them with a fair amount of confidence that if there's something wrong with them, I can fix them. And in this case, neither one of them would feed properly. It had a few different problems, so I've been down in the shop scratching my head and getting these things to where they feed in the shop and they're cycling well with dummy rounds in the shop. But it's time now to test fire them, because sometimes there'll be problems that show up upon recoil, so you really have to test fire them to make sure that they're going to operate right. And besides, of course, it's fun to take them out and shoot them, so we want to do that anyway. So stick around. We'll kind of show you what these baby carbines look like compared to a standard Colt Lightning carbine, and then we'll take a few shots with them and just see how they perform. Okay, so here's a little closer look at these carbines. Now, right up front, we've got a 4440 baby carbine, full nickel. And there's just not a lot of full nickel ones out there. And this one's in pretty good shape. You know, a lot of the nickel carbines flaked a high percentage of the nickel off, and this one's still got a high percentage of its nickel. Now, most of the baby carbines are in 4440. It's unusual to find them in 3220, and even more unusual in my experience to find them in 3840. But that's what this second one is. This one, of course, is a pretty well used 3840. I haven't seen production numbers, and I don't know if that information's out there anywhere, but I've seen quite a few more 3220s than the 3840s, and of course the vast majority of the baby carbines are 4440. Now, here in the back is a standard carbine that I snuck out of the wife's safe this morning. This one's in 3220. There's a first model 3220, a pretty nice one. But just for a example of the difference in the barrel. Now, it's not just eye-catching right off the bat, but if you look at them closely, a standard carbine has a straight taper. Otherwise, if you put a straight edge on it, it would hug that barrel all the way down. And these baby carbines they taper pretty rapidly for the first few inches, and then they're much smaller out here than the standard carbine. In fact, out here at the muzzle, they're actually smaller diameter than the magazine tube is. You can't flip this barrel band upside down. It won't. The magazine tube portion of it won't fit, or actually the other way around. The barrel portion of it won't fit on the magazine tube. And of course, so the standard carbines have a different barrel band out here that's bigger for the end of the barrel. So I weighed these this morning, and the 32 baby carbine, I didn't bring it up because it's not functioning quite right, but it weighed in at about 5 pounds 10 ounces. Now, the 38 was about 5 pounds 8 ounces, and the 44 about 5 pounds 6 ounces. And of course, the difference is in the bore. You know, the larger the caliber, the more metal has been removed by drilling it out for the bore. Now, this standard carbine in 32 is about 6 pounds 8 ounces. So you know, basically about a pound difference between the baby carbine and the standard carbine. But when we're talking about 5 or 6 pound guns, it's significant. Okay, so we're up here at a kind of a pistol range, 20-25 yards, just because we're function testing today, and I have no idea where these things are going to shoot. You know, if they shoot pretty well, maybe we'll put a jug or two out there a little bit further. I loaded up 6 rounds in each beforehand because I figured if I got to talking here with both 3840 and 4440, it'd be just like me to load one in the wrong carbine and have a heck of a time here. So let's see how these things are going to function, if we got them right. Okay, I'll shoot on steel to start with, see where it's shooting. Oh, that one a little high. We seem to have functioned properly. Let's hit a jug. Uh-oh, it didn't jack one in apparently. There it goes. I just didn't stroke it far enough. Oh, there we go. Oh, we're not feeding quite right. Now we're going. Okay, let's hit a jug a little further out there. Oh, yeah, it hit it just a little high. Okay, so... oh, it's wanting to feed every other one for some strange reason. Let's shoot that jug up close. Oh, there it goes. That is really strange. I've never had one do that. It's feeding every other shell. Okay, so we're back to the drawing board. Let's hit it on steel again. Okay, so we know we got a little work to do on that one yet. That's really bizarre. Okay, let's try this 4440. We'll go on that left steel to start with. That fed the first one in just right. Boy, these things are just light little things. It's like shooting a 22. Okay, a little bit high. Let's shoot that jug. Did the same thing. Oh, but it shoots well. Oh, now it doesn't want to eject. This is why we test fire them. These things just function perfectly when we were in the shop with dummy rounds. Let's shoot that jug off to the right. Oh, yeah, still not ejecting quite right. It's feeding good, but not ejecting. And it's shooting really well too. Okay, I guess all we're left, let's shoot that farthest jug out there, see if we can shoot a little lower. And I didn't. Ah, there we go. Shot over it both times. There, it ejected beautifully. So we got a little something going on with the ejection on that one. So trying to get these things ready to go to the big show over in Cody, the Winchester Arms Collectors Association show that's coming up this next week. So it's kind of imperative that I get them running quite right, because you know, a lot of people sell these things and never tested them out or know they aren't quite functioning right. But I really like to test fire them, and so people can know that they're going to work right when they buy a gun from me. And if I haven't test fired them, I'm honest with people and tell them that too, that I think it's okay, but you just never know till you shoot it. And this is a perfect example. Like I say, they were running really well in the shop with dummy rounds, but you know, problems show up when you get out here shooting live ammunition. Okay, so I've been feeding a few rounds through this, and seems to be feeding really well. So I've put 5 more rounds in it, and we'll just make sure that it wasn't operator error. So that's been known to happen before. We'll just hit steel. And it's still not feeding right. There it goes. Not every time though. Okay, so back to the drawing board with both of them. This one won't feed right, this one won't eject. The ejection doesn't bother me too much. There's just a reason that the spent cartridge is falling off the hook of the extractor as it's extracting. So typically that's just a matter of working on that extractor hook a little bit. This one, I'm not sure what's going on with it. It's functioning flawlessly, except about every other round it just doesn't feed. I think the gate's not letting it come out of the magazine tube for some reason, and it has something to do with recoil, because when I'm not shooting it, it functions every time. It feeds every round. So I'm sure it's just a little something in there that needs to be tuned up just a little bit. So back to the shop for a little tune up. Okay, so I think I found the problem with this nickel plated 44 carbine. If we put a spent cartridge in it and by itself, then it ejects. Not powerfully. Let's try that again. There it goes. Okay, so the problem is when we load underneath it, then every time it's trying to raise the carrier a little too soon and jamming up into the cartridge as it's being extracted. So it isn't the extractor hook at all like I first was thinking of up on the hill. For some reason this carrier is bouncing up sooner than it needs to. So I'm going to bring the camera in here pretty close. There's been a lot of people ask me about disassembling Colt Lightning, so we'll show you just a kind of a brief overview of how I take a Lightning apart, and then maybe we'll even show you how to put it back together. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take this stock off. And just about like taking most any of this style off, just take the tang screw out and hopefully the stock will come right off. And it did. No problem there. Then the next thing, on a carbine like this, we need to take this barrel band screw out. And some of these are boogered up pretty badly. This is a very tiny little screw, and even smaller on a baby carbine because they're a little smaller barrel band. That one come out all right, and doesn't seem to be stripped either. Most of them are stripped. I'd say at least half, but usually I think even more than that. Okay, so we can pull this out, and the nice thing about a Lightning magazine tube is that it captures the follower and the spring on this end, so it comes out as a unit. You don't have a bunch of parts flying everywhere as the spring unloads when you take it apart. And now you have a choice. Now you can take the grips off or scales. You know, they're really valuable, so I try to take them off. Just, you don't absolutely have to take it apart, but man, if you booger up one of these or break them, and they're pretty fragile, they're hard to replace. It's hard to find good ones, and these are in really nice shape, and they're going to come out pretty easily, thankfully. Sometimes they're really tough to get off if they've been on for 100+ years without being taken off, but these are coming right off. Okay, now much like a 73 Winchester, we've got a screw on each side of the receiver here that holds the upper portion of the receiver and the lower portion together. And once we get those out, we can just take them apart as a unit. Okay, so we need to cock the hammer, work the slide back some, and now if it comes easy, it's just a matter of pushing the lower receiver forward some, and it's not gonna, there it comes. See, there's this half moon right here that fits in the front of the receiver, and so you have to push this lower part of the receiver forward to get it past there in order to get it out. And this one's pretty darn tight. Some of them come out real easy and some of them don't. And a lot of them, you'll see people have beat on the end of this lower receiver really hard and mushroomed it over. We're going to use a plastic mallet here to tap it forward. Tapping is much better than beating on it. And here we go. The very back of this receiver is really tight for some reason. And there it comes apart. Here's our lower portion of the receiver with our inner workings. in the upper portion of the receiver, we've got our bolt and the locking blocks in here. And we don't really need to get into these, or I don't think we do at this point, because our problem is this carrier, and I can already tell what the problem is. One of the things that is unusual about the design of these is that, of course, you know, if we're gonna hot rod them, slick them up, make them a little smoother and whatnot, we polish a lot of the parts. But if you polish that to where it's too smooth, then exactly the problem that we're encountering will pop up. And that's that as the slide comes back and as the locking blocks ride. Let's go ahead and take that apart so I can explain it a little better, maybe. Show you how it comes apart. That's too big. And usually we can just push the pin out that holds the locking block in if we get everything lined up properly. Let's give it a little help. Okay, there we go. So we line, there's this pinhole here, and on both sides it's bigger on this side, so we always have to push it this way, push this pin out, and then our locking block comes out off of the bolt there. But this locking block, it's attached onto the bolt there, and as it moves forward, then it locks in like that. So that's how Lightning locks into place when it's in battery. Okay, and then as it slides back, as we're working the slide here, pushing it back, at the very end of its throw, this part of the locking block rides against that carrier and pushes it up. But what happens is if this carrier is too loose like this one is, as we're working the action, just a little bit of push on it, or it drags maybe just a little bit on this part of the locking blocks, starts popping it up. And it needs to stay down until the very end, or else we run into the problem that we've run into where it pops up too soon, shoves the cartridge into the spent cartridge that's being ejected and jams everything up. So what we really need to do here is maybe spread the arms of this out, and it's just held in with a couple of screws right here. We can spread those arms out a little bit or rough them up a little bit and keep it from opening up too soon. I've got to get a different bit here. And typically these aren't in there very tight because they're held in place by the outside of the receiver here, so they don't have to be real tight. Okay, and boy, those are rough. That came out of a very rough and rusty gun. I might just even find another set. I think I've got another carrier to put in there and replace this one. The rest of the internals look very, very, very good on this, but somebody has replaced this with a piece of junk. So I'll be back with a new carrier and we'll put it back together. Alright, so here's a much better carrier. Let's see how this one works. I'm going to put a little oil on it here. Of course, like I say, we don't want it too slicked up because we don't want it to flop up there, but it does ride against other parts. So anytime we have a part riding against another, we need some oil. And the same way with these screws, they got a little stud on the end that carrier rotates on, so we want to put a little oil on them. And notice this carrier is much tighter than the other one was. It's a little tricky lining up these screws. Make sure it's going in the pivot hole on that carrier. There, I heard it snap in. Okay, then we'll do this side. Usually after the first one goes in, the second one lines up pretty good, but not always, so you kind of got to watch. And you can tell you start getting a lot of resistance. It's not going where it's supposed to, but that is. Okay, so see, it takes some force now to run that up and down. And I know it's counterintuitive, we always want to slick everything up, but when it's slicked up too much, this carrier, that can cause problems. Now we'll put this locking block in here, and we shouldn't get any movement, yep, till right at the very end of the stroke. So we're good now. And that's how they lock up. Pretty positive lockup. Okay, so now it's time to put this thing back together, and that's the tricky part. Oh, first we've got to put our locking block back in. We've got our pin here. We've got our bolt, and the bolt can just slide out when we've got the locking block out. We put that locking block down in there, line everything up, and then this pin with a little oil on it. And let's get a little oil on the surfaces of that locking block too. It rides on a whole bunch of different surfaces there. Okay. And it's going to go right in by hand. Okay, so, and when everything's put back together, the bolt can't go far enough back to line those holes up, so that's how that pin doesn't have to be tied in there. It does on a 3220, but that's a whole different story. We'll get into that some other time when we take a 3220 apart. Okay, so here's the tricky part now, putting the upper and lower receiver back together, and it's really hard on one that's stiff like this. But you see this part of the locking block here, that little arm, the end of it has to go into this little notch in the slide here. So that has to go in there, and they have to match up just perfectly. And it's really tough to do because you have to do it blind. And if you've got one like this that's really stiff going in, then everything moves and you can't see where it's moving. So this one is going to be a challenge, I can tell already. Okay, so what I like to do is I bring the bolt back about a quarter of the way or so, and try to kind of look at it and line it up to where it's going to fit. Now the hammer has to be caulked. Now we're going to try to slide everything together, and this one again is so tight it's going to make it really tough to do. Okay, so we can tell now we can rotate it so we know that it's not right exactly where it needs to be. So we need to keep a little pressure on it, and we're going to move this slide back, and it felt like it maybe went right in. Now we can test it by, yeah, if we move the slide back and forth and the bolt goes back and forth, then we're in the right place. So we got kind of lucky there. Sometimes you got to chase it a little bit. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so now we've got to move this lower part back into place, put that half moon where it belongs, and this one's one that's tight enough we're going to have to tap on it. I don't like to do that, but sometimes you have to. And always use a plastic mallet, not a claw hammer. Okay, so there we go. We're back in place. We can put these screws in the side. And now we're going to cycle the action and see if that carrier stays down. And it does. It came up right at the very end of the stroke, which is exactly where it needs to. Perfect. So I think we've got that. Alright, so we put it back together, and now we can test it out. We'll put a empty in the chamber and a dummy round in the magazine, and we'll cycle it. Hey, there it goes. So we've got her fixed. We'll try cycling it a few more times, and then we'll take it back up on the hill and see if we can't get it to shoot and cycle. Okay, so let's see if we did any good down at the shop. Now with this 38, it dawned on me after it wasn't feeding quite right, and I'd had it running really good in the shop, that a guy came into the shop one day and he wanted to look at it, and as he picked it up, he put it on half cock accidentally, and then he just started jerking on the slide, and I think he just bent that loading gate just enough that it was just intermittently letting him out of the magazine tube. So let's see if maybe we've got it fixed now. I just altered it just a little bit. Yeah, let the first one out. Let's see how she does. Yeah, we got one on the carrier. Yep. All right, 5 for 5. Looks like she's going to run now. That's kind of a relief. That one really had me perplexed. Now let's see if this full nickel 4440, that new carrier, is going to make the difference in it and it's going to eject properly. We'll go to the left target this time. Hey, so far so good. It's ejecting great. All right, problem solved. Both of them are running great now. Now, of course, the only true test of how a Lightning is feeding and ejecting is to slam fire it. Now, if you watch my video, Lightning Fast Lightning, you'll know that as long as the safeties are in place that were built into these to keep them from firing out of battery, they're perfectly safe to slam fire. And by slam fire, I mean hold the trigger and just work the slide. Something like this. I think she's feeding and ejecting just fine. Okay, so that was fun. So let's give this 38 a try. I'm a little less confident that it's going to be able to slam fire and feed consistent. But I was wrong. That's working like a dream. Okay, so now that we know they can shoot fast, let's see if maybe we can shoot for a little distance. We've got a couple of jugs way up in those junipers up there. And we'll see if we can't scare one anyway. Hit it! Wasn't too impressive, but we could sure hear the thunk. These 3840 and 4440 cowboy action loads just don't blow up those jugs up there like some of the higher pressure calibers. Okay, let's try this 4440. We'll go to that left jug. Right over the top of it. Oh, it hit it, but hit it high. Let's see if we can't hit it a little lower. Gotta shoot right at the base of it. Oh, goodness. Boy, it's fun shooting, but be better if I was hitting. That hit it, drilled it dead center. Okay, so thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I've sure had a blast with these little baby carbines. Now, if you do work on your own Lightnings, there's not a lot of sources for parts out there, but my good friend down in Arkansas by the name of Simmons has been making, he started out making screws for them, and now he's making a lot of replacement parts for them, and this does a great job. So if you need some Lightning parts, Sam's the guy to go to, and I'll put his contact information down in the description somewhere. So we've got these things where they're ready to go, and we're getting ready to pack up and head for Cody. Until next time, happy trails from the Cinnabar.